How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another Marvel Snap Zone video. I missed last week's video for the ladder ranked tier list. So I'm going to really quickly cover that. We're just going to look at it really quick so we can see how the meta has shifted from then to this. I've just been super busy and wasn't able to do the video at a reasonable time last week. So let's look at last week. This is important. Things have gotten shaken up with Elsa in the meta. There was a lot of tier 1 decks last week. We had Move, Ramp, Thanos Control, Sarah Control, Shuri Sauron, Loki Collector, and then tier 2 only 3 decks: Iron Patriot, Bounce, and Hela Tribunal. After this tier list came out, there was an OTA last week. Couple notable changes. One was Shuri. Nothing really changed much with Shuri. Second one was Alioth getting nerfed and Forge getting nerfed. And you're going to notice with this week's tier list, there is only 3 tier 1 lists or decks. There's Move, Shuri Sauron, and Loki Collector, which is what you would expect. Hela Discard is heading tier 2. That's new on the list. We'll go over why I think that's there. Sarah Control is down. Thor Miracle up from tier 3. Thanos Control down from tier 1. Deadpool Destroy making an appearance in tier 2. It's been sitting in tier 3 for the longest time, but it's here now. And then Bounce tier 2 to wrap it up. Cerebro 3 and 5 are the silent performers, so if you want to try those out, make sure you try those out. But the changes, the notable changes, last week we had Iron Patriot in tier 2. That is gone from the list. We had Ramp in tier 1, completely gone from the list, and Evolved Doomwave finally has fallen off the list. All of which can be attributed to the Alioth. Well, I guess not all of which. Iron Patriot, probably not as strong because of the Forge nerf. Ramp and Evolved Doomwave, not as strong due to Alioth, the Alioth nerf. Also, Doomwave, I think you're seeing much less waves in the meta right now because of Mobius. There's been a few weeks of Mobius and a chance for Mobius to fit into where he's going to fit in the meta. And now that he's found his spot, Wave is a bit less effective for those decks that require him, like Evolved Doomwave. So that's kind of how the meta has settled so far. Let's talk about the first deck. Talk about Move. Move used to run Alioth and has since just swapped Alioth out for Captain Marvel. It hasn't skipped a beat. It is still the top deck. It's still the most versatile deck. And the ability for this deck to just get power out and stay flexible while doing it is just nuts. When you're able to fill up a lane and play Nightcrawler, get the Elsa buff, move it. Play Jeff, get the Elsa buff, move it. Play Silk, get the Elsa buff, hopefully it gets moved. Spider-Man gets the buff, it moves. All of these moves can trigger Kraven. Playing Vision on that lane, getting an 11 power that you can just move around. Captain Marvel as well. It's just strong. It really hasn't skipped a beat. It has a above 0.5 cube rate average, which is pretty insane. So obviously did not rely super heavily on Alioth, and it's still the top deck. I highly recommend trying it. I'm not a big Move fan just because I'm not a big fan of the archetype, but if you're trying to play top decks, this is the one to do it with. And then this is the list that Alioth was in, I believe from last week, but this is subbed in. It's a little bit more aggressive on the top end, but yeah, give it a try. Next up is Shuri Sauron, and it's the same list. It has Alioth. Maybe previous lists had like America Chavez or something to get more consistency with Shuri, but at its core, it's basically the same list. I'm not going to go over how it's played, but this is one of the few lists that play armor. And Den has two theories on why with the Shuri nerf this is still doing really well. And one is because destroy lists have progressed, and this is one of the only lists that run armor, and armor really just shuts down those decks pretty good for a 2-drop. So the more destroy there is, the better armor gets, and this is one of the few decks that are running armor at the moment. And then of course Alioth being pretty oppressive for this deck. Obviously you play armor into Shuri into your Red Skull on one lane, but you still got to get that Taskmaster off in another lane, and a lot of times Alioth caused problems. It's also worth noting that Shang-Chi and Shadow King are being seen a little bit more in the meta right now, so this deck might struggle just slightly more than it is now, but I mean it's doing fantastic. I don't think Shuri is going anywhere. This is the new Old Faithful, so again, Shuri. And then Shuri Kitty, if you haven't tried this, with Elsa, the ability to get repeated buffs on, say, Kitty, or again, just doing it with Nightcrawler, Jeff, that kind of thing. Elsa is just a very strong card, so definitely give it a shot if you haven't played the Shuri Kitty list. I don't know how long it'll be around when Wave comes back. If it does come back, could find some problems there. So next up is Loki Collector. Not much to say about this deck. Elsa just made this deck so much better with Collector and Loki, and then some decks run Quinjet. I like running the versions with Quinjet. This one doesn't have it, but just the ability to get Collector very big, the ability to have your opponent guessing on what you're able to do. You're able to generate random cards with things like Coulson if you need to. Luke Cage, I think, is pretty necessary to run at the moment, but when he's not, then that's kind of like your play around spot. Mobius, very effective against a lot of decks at the moment. It's Loki Collector. I'm not going to talk about it too much. Solid deck we've seen before. Going down to tier 2, we're looking at Hela Discard. It's finally in the rankings, and mostly I think because Hela Tribunal has lost popularity. Again, you guys have heard me say this. I'm not a big fan of discard decks. I have tried a few with Black Knight, and Black Knight has been a lot of fun, but I don't like the randomness. I hope it gets a little bit more tools to make discard a little bit more focused and a little bit more consistent. But I mean, it is at the top of tier 2, so obviously it's performing well, and its ability, if you do what you're trying to do, as far as getting Hela off. If you can get Hela off on turn 6, there's really nothing that can beat this deck. The amount of power that you can put out is pretty insane. It's worth noting that with Mobius, it really limits your ability to get your swarms off, and your swarm is pretty key to trigger your lockjaw. So that could be why this is still in tier 2, to be honest with you. And then less Eliath, so you're able to get that Hell off more consistently and not have it be destroyed. A lot of the times when you get to turn 6, you don't have priority with this deck, so you need to get that Hell off, and if it gets destroyed before it reveals, then that's a problem. So anyways, Hela Discard. Next up, Elsa Control. I missed this deck last week because I didn't do a video. Coming back to the meta, I love this deck before. It's fantastic now. Obviously, Sarah is a little bit less effective when there's a lot of Mobiuses out in the meta, but Elsa really takes this deck just to another level. It was already strong before Elsa. It wasn't top of the meta during last month because other decks kind of had their chance to shine. But Elsa Control has always been that deck that's just sitting in everyone's back pocket that eventually gonna come back into the meta. And Elsa has let it come back in the meta. I've also been a proponent of Shadow King being an unbelievable card, and I think people are playing it more now, but I think that's been a severely underrated card for a very long time. Obviously, with Shadow King in this deck, you need to be a little bit careful because you don't want to play him on your cards that are buffed, but his ability to just destroy opponents' lanes is fantastic, especially with Black Knight out now. With Black Knight, they can get the shard, and if they discarded an Infinite, they have a 20 power shard, and Shadow King just gets rid of the whole thing. Next up, Thor Miracle. I think this was tier 3 last week. Let me just double check. Yeah, tier 3 last week. I think it was tier 3 in the Conquest meta as well. This is just a fun deck. It's very close to like Bounce, but without the actual bounce portion, without like Beast or anything like that. But obviously the idea here is to get to your Elsa buffs as fast as possible, flood the board. You have Wasp and Yellow Jacket, try to fill the board up as fast as possible. You can play Kitty on 1. You can get Elsa out on 2 with Wasp and with a Wasp or a Yellow Jacket out. Then you're on your way to playing Kitty and something else and just starting that Elsa generation by turn 3. So just it's a fun deck. It feels like it came out of nowhere. I don't think it was really played around with at all before about 2 weeks ago. But again, Elsa is letting a lot of these decks that people haven't tried or just haven't seen really just shine. A lot of these drop a lot of low cost decks, and normally the answer to that is Wave, but a lot of these low cost stuff decks are running Mobius. You don't need Mobius. He will make stuff easier, but because there's not a lot of waves in the meta, probably not going to run into a lot of issues if you don't have them. Next up, Thanos Control. I actually haven't tried this specific Thanos Control deck with Elsa. I tried Elsa in a different Thanos Control deck that I was running. I didn't really like it. I'm not convinced that this is a top tier deck. However, I have been running like a Thanos Destroy control that I think has been doing really well. It runs Killmonger in there, obviously Death and that kind of thing. Has Alioth still, Professor X, Devil Dinosaur. But I think with Killmonger right now in this Elsa meta, you're able to even drop him early to just prevent your opponent from getting so many Elsa buffs, which is pretty huge. This deck has been doing really well, even with the Alioth nerf. Runs leader, just runs this like leader clone package. Alioth, I really compare to the old leader, but Thanos Control apparently still doing pretty good. I don't think it's going to stick around here for too long. I think it was here last week. Was it tier 1 last week? Yeah, it was tier 1 last week. I think things were getting shaken up. I think it's starting to settle. The meta's starting to settle, and it's just on its way down. So I wouldn't play this thinking that you're going to dominate by any means. Next up, Deadpool Destroy. This one I was really excited to talk about. I'm glad that it's up from tier 3. I've been playing a version of this instead of Lady Deathstrike and Arnim Zola. What does my deck run? It runs Taskmaster and Hulkbuster. That's what it is. But overall, this has been a lot of fun. I know that it's been around for a while. I have not been convinced of it being good. I'm still not convinced that it's good, mainly because it has, once decks start throwing armor back in, this is going to struggle. But the opportunity to play this right now is up there. It's a lot of fun. The ability to get big Deadpools out, the ability in this version to get Lady Deathstrike to do some crazy stuff is just really fun. So I'm glad this is up in tier 2. I wouldn't expect it to stick around there or make it to tier 1 by any means. But with the absence of Alioth and the absence of armor currently in the meta, this is now the time to try this and just to have a good time. Destroying stuff it's just a lot of fun. I don't know what else to say. Next up is Bounce. I'm not going to talk about Bounce too much. It's Bounce. The wave is not around too much. This deck's ability to dump a bunch of power on the last turn is fantastic. I will say it struggles a bit with Mobius because Beast can't reduce the cost of cards. There's a lot of Mobius stuff out there. If you're gonna play an archetype like this, I would just play something like Savage Control or the Thor Miracle version. I'm not convinced that Bounce is still good, especially with just all the Mobiuses I've been seeing. At least at Infinite, I feel like every deck is running it. It's to the point where I'm running Zabu in like this Black Knight deck, and I don't even know if I'm going to be running Zabu. I think I'm going to change the deck because Zabu just gets shut off. So I don't know if I would run this Bounce deck. It's Bounce. It's obviously it's strong, but if you run into the Mobiuses, it just becomes a problem. So as far as the deck list, not much has changed except Elsa is in here. Again, dumping a bunch of cards, Elsa will be here. And then we have tier 3 decks. I'm not going to go over them too much, but there's Phoenix Force. If you want to play these, make sure you go try them out. Phoenix Force, I think it was in there a couple weeks ago. Discard Dracula. I'm not a big fan of Discard, though Discard Dracula might be worth trying now with Black Knight. If you don't have Black Knight, I don't think he's going to be like a top tier card or anything. But so far, I've been playing him for the last hour or so. He's been a lot of fun. He is a fun card. Is he worth your caches? I don't know. I don't think so. I just think the archetype he fits into, it just isn't consistent enough. But he is fun. So if you're looking for fun, get Black Knight. And then Guardians Lockdown. You guys all know I'm a huge fan of lockdown decks. This lockdown deck, and this was made popular. It's been going around on Twitter. If you're following social media, you've probably seen this, and this is probably old news to you. So I mean, that's the whole tier list. This was the first tier list video that I've been really excited for. Things have shaken up. I know I've been gone for a couple, not that I've been gone, I've been playing for a couple weeks, but last week I didn't make a video, so the change from 2 weeks ago has just been huge. And I am really excited for what's going on in the meta right now. As usual, if you love all things Marvel Snap, make sure you like and subscribe, hit the bell. I'll see you in the next one.